Welcome to Aging in Place Strategies and Answers with Linda Prio. Will it be possible to remain in my home as I age? Do I feel safe in my home? How do I figure out how much support I will need when my health needs start to change? What if I decide to move into a community instead? Which community will meet my needs now and in the future? Who will play a role in helping me with decision making? Do you ask yourself these same questions? Aging in Place Strategies and Answers can help you gain practical knowledge that will help you create your own Aging in Place roadmap. If you are already a care partner, a power of attorney, or in crisis mode with your Aging in Place strategy, you will learn what you need to know that you don't know. For over 20 years, I have been marketing Aging in Place services to clients and educating families and healthcare professionals in how to put aging in place strategies into place. When you utilize aging in place, you are allowed to choose where you want to live and make those decisions so that you can retain your quality of life. Welcome to Aging in Place Strategies and Answers. Listeners, I hope you have downloaded my new podcast called Retirement Planning or Longevity Planning, because today I get to talk with Jim and Martha Brangenberg, who have been talking about a different kind of retirement planning since 2013, when they started their own talk show called iRetire4Him, challenging thousands across the globe with the simple message that your workplace or your retirement can be your mission field. In addition to their talk show, they offer mentoring podcasts, radio spots, and books to get their message out about a new way to embrace your retirement. Let's meet Martha and Jim. Martha and Jim, say hello to my listeners.
Linda, it's so great to be here with you today.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Oh, it's my pleasure and my privilege. Now, you guys are some interesting people. It sounds like you met when you were very young, and I'm excited to hear some information about how you met, your educational background, and some of the businesses that you have been involved in, because you sound very entrepreneurial.
Yes, that would be a true statement. So what's really neat is that God intersected Jim and my lives at the age of 13, but we didn't know each other until we were 16. So we went to the same youth conference that our denomination had. We both committed ourselves to full-time Christian service. And then 3 years later, my family moved to Minnesota, where Jim lived. And through getting to become friends and spending time together, then we realized that we had both made this same commitment and had similar paths. And so as young adults, I guess you would call us, and we started dating, and we saw that
We weren't adults when we started dating.
Well, that's true. Okay, but we thought we were so mature. But anyway, in that whole process, as we were looking to our future, we assumed that because of the commitment we had made as 13-year-olds, that meant that we would be going to seminary, becoming a youth pastor or missionary. But at the same time, we both were going to school for business and for computers, and had this desire to, run things and make things happen, entrepreneurially. And so we really felt this conflict. Like early on in our marriage, it was like, okay, now we need to get this business going so that you can go to seminary. And you want to kind of take it from there?
And we had two couples in our lives that were, we were doing volunteer youth ministry. We had two couples in our lives that they basically, this is what they taught us. Business is business and church is church. They have nothing to do with each other. So make a lot of money in business and give it to the church. Maybe you'll serve on a building committee one day. That was the epitome of their Christian experience. And we're like, that just doesn't sound right. But they were the people pouring into our lives. And so we lived in that paradigm, but it was really frustrating for us because we felt this call to ministry, but we also felt this call to entrepreneurialism. And even though when we applied to seminary, we tried to get enrolled in seminary, the Lord stopped us twice and said, no, that's not for you. That's not where you need to go. But to make a long story short, at age 40, we finally were exposed to the reality that our work really did matter to God, that God really cared about the work that we were doing. I have an insurance background and an IT background. Martha's got a retail background and an accounting background and an insurance background, and all the stuff that we were doing together, those things matter to God. In fact, we had a large ministry because we had thousands of customers. And that, in fact, was the place God had put us on purpose. And so that's where the journey really began. But it wasn't until age 40 that we understood it and started to embrace it. And I said to the Lord, I know you want me to do something with this information when you give me a name for it. And it took from 2006 until 2012. 2012 was when I finally got the name iRetire4Him. And we didn't know what God was going to do with it. But about 90 days later, the Lord had us speaking at an event about 5 ways to connect your faith to your work. And I sat down in the room next to a lady who owned a Christian radio station. She goes, Jim, you need to talk about that on the radio. And that's how iRetire4Him really got started. This woman, Deborah Roseman, said, you need to talk about that on the radio. And we started 1 day a week drive time in St. Pete, Florida, went to 5 days a week, eventually in Tampa Bay. But we started podcasting from the beginning. And now we've done 2,700 combined podcasts between all of our different brands. But that's how it started.
Wow, that's incredible. And I know that frustration can be similar for other people. So I'm so glad that you brought that into what we're talking about today, because I had heard one of your podcasts and a gentleman speaking about that and making that connection and how important that is. In fact, our church leadership was talking about that as well, is that you guys are so fortunate because you get to know people outside the church, and we just don't get to do that. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Let's take a moment to hear from one of our sponsors. Hi, listeners. This is Linda Prio, your host and one of the sponsors of Aging in Place Strategies and Answers. If you would like to have a speaker for your group or your organization, please contact me at linda.agingstrategies@gmail.com. Now, let's get back to the podcast. I'm the leader of a women's Bible study, and so I wanted to figure out how I could support the women in my group that were working outside the home, knowing that women have a lot on their plates. And so I just did a quick Google search, and you guys came up. So I'm like, this is awesome. I can integrate this. I can point them to you. But please share with me and my listeners how this idea of workplace and mission finally just came together for you guys.
Well, I think that, for one thing, Jim started a good friend of ours that we were going to church with and doing life with, shared a devotion with Jim, and it was Oz Hillman's Today God is First. And it was really the first time that somebody with authority and scripture said, your work matters. Oz's devotions are all about that, finding the scripture that talks about our work and how God actually created work for good, not as a curse, just walking through the whole truth of what work is in the scriptures, and then giving us the ability to say, we haven't been neglecting the call that God had on our lives, but rather we need to live it out. And he gave me the ability to be good with numbers. Like, that is not to be ignored just because it's not something that I could use. I didn't see how to directly use it for mission work. And, the same thing with Jim and just all of his gifts, talents, and abilities. We saw this finally understanding God created us that way on purpose so that in our workplace, we can be salt and light. And really that was an eye opener for us. And then we've learned later, we both did the Strength Finders tests, and we both have responsibility as a very high core value for us. And so what we've discovered in hindsight, when you look back at things and you go, oh, this is how it happened. We both felt like now that we know this, we need other people to know this. We are responsible to steward this message. And so when the radio, was like, how can we tell more people that what they're doing every day really matters, and that their mission field, they're getting paid to go to their mission field every day and do their work.
Fully funded missionaries. And that's really, to finish that whole thought, Linda, it's when you realize that 99% of believers go to work every day and shut off their faith. Imagine if this reality came into place, if every believer started to realize that everything about them should be changing. Because of following Jesus, that sanctification process, everything about us should be changing, and everyone around us should be benefiting from our faith, whether they believe in Jesus or not. That's the kingdom alive on the planet. And if you could activate even 1 million believers to vibrantly live out their faith, loving on people, doing a phenomenal job every day, imagine the impact on our country. Imagine if we could activate 2 million or maybe 10 million of them. We don't have to have all 55 million of them. But if you started to activate believers, and for them to not just sit in pews on Sunday, but to see that 1 hour is to activate them for the 167 other hours of the week in their mission field, that's a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your book, which I loved, you gave really practical tips of how we can do this. Sometimes we get the wrong notion of what that might look like, but there's so many subtle, small ways that we can make an impact. And so in this world that we're living with now, with more people retiring and then this gift of longevity, you guys have come to this revelation that retirement really needs to be redefined. And you discuss that in your book. But I specifically want to spend a little bit of time talking about peer pressure in retirement, which I said I felt like I was going through internally. And also that retiring in a different way can be almost countercultural. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I think first, the basis of this is to understand, as believers, the American dream of retirement is not biblical. I mean, you could think it is, it's kind of convenient, but that's not really fair to the rest of the people across the planet who don't get to have the American dream of retirement because they don't live in America. It's not biblical. Retirement's not biblical. There's nowhere in the scriptures that says at one point in time you stop working and you have vacation the rest of your life. You just do nothing. You get seashells, you play tennis or pickleball or golf, and you watch television and you sit outside and drink lemonade under the umbrella. That's nowhere in the scriptures that says that. Maybe in the book of Hesitations, but you got to find that. All right, so
I'm not going to look for that book.
Okay, so you have to understand that reality. Retirement's not biblical. So retirement's just another phase in life, and really, there's nowhere that says you need to stop working. I know all kinds of people that are working in their late 60s or late 70s or early 80s. I have a friend that works for a guy in Kansas City who just stopped working day to day, 98 years old, I think he was. Mm-hmm. If you're capable of working, work. Because here's what we see that's such a disaster is that there's so much peer pressure to retire at 65 or whenever your Social Security kicks in. I mean, I think for our generation, we'll start retiring at 67, and to then grab all of your stuff and move to Florida or Arizona or Texas. Nobody moves to California anymore. Everybody moves out of California. If there's a lot of reasons there, which we won't go to on your show today. But they take everything they have and they move away from their family and go hang out with a bunch of old people. It's a disaster, absolutely disaster. And that peer pressure is really from the enemy, because nowhere the church is in trouble. Everybody used to say, we're getting close to having the church being in trouble. No, we're there. We're out of time. And let's just call them chronologically superior people that my friend Grant Skeldon called people chronologically superior, because that's what we are. Chronologically superior people are desperately needed in the lives of young people. They want to have access to people that are older than them. And that we've got to push back against the peer pressure, because our country needs the wisdom that we have as people over 50, because they don't have it. And a lot of them come from broken families where they didn't have access to parents. They didn't have access to grandparents. Martha.
Well, I just think about it's kind of great. In I Retire for Him, the book, my dad shares the story of after he retired, He sold his business and he started building this garden train. So he had this big, beautiful train in the backyard. People would come and get tours of it. And it was this thing he tinkered with. And my mom, finally said to him, Ted, you're kind of getting boring. Like, you need to do something more productive. And so he got the opportunity to look at every possibility and say, what could I do now that I would love to do that I never got to do when I was running my own business? And I think this is where the peer pressure thing comes in, because number one, your peers think, well, you didn't plan well because you have to keep working, or you're going back to work because you don't have enough money. And maybe that's true for people, but it doesn't have to be the only reason you go back to work. So my dad is a woodworker. And he decided, I'm going to go work at the local woodworking store where I can spend my paycheck on the tools that I want for my hobby, but I get to meet people and I get to be with people and I get to maybe even share Jesus in the process. And so I think, that was a bold step because he didn't need to go work, but for his own mental health and interest and all of that, it was a really good idea, but it wasn't what his peers were doing. And so I think that, it is even just like when our parents said when we were little, like there are certain kids they wanted you to hang around with because they were a good influence. And I think it's shifting that tide and saying either I want to find people who have that similar idea than me, or let's start this new idea that says, you know what, let's go see where we can have an influence and where we can do something different in this stage of life that can have impact and that can be fun. And you don't have to worry about how much an hour you're making or, what kind of hours you're going to be. You get to pick your hours if you only want to work a few. But whatever that peer pressure is, kind of saying, why am I struggling with that? And why is this what is supposed to be the norm?
Linda, let's just be honest with you. We lived for 20 years in Florida. We lived in 2 different retirement neighborhoods. Let me tell you, fully retired on vacation retirees are miserable. Let me just save all of your listeners a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of hassle. Don't do it. Don't do it. You're going to be miserable. And if you move to Florida or Arizona, move into one of those retirement neighborhoods, you're going to be surrounded by miserable people who want to create a concentration camp by their homeowners association and rule everything you do. You can't paint your house that color. No, you can't cut your lawn that way. You can't trim your trees. What do you mean you want to park a car outside? I mean, it's terrible. And these people are miserable because they have no purpose, because you can only play pickleball so much. You can only play tennis and golf so much. They're miserable. They want purpose. Stay where you are or move into a new neighborhood, but surround yourself with young people that you can pour your life into. But don't move to Florida and move into a retirement neighborhood because you're going to regret it.
Yeah. What I hear you say as you share this so passionately is that we actually have a lot of freedom in our second act or in our next stage or in how we want to create. And I do say that word create and plan. I never dreamed that I'd be doing a podcast, but I am. This is my second act. And I feel really good about it. I feel like I am in my lane. But I just want our listeners to hear that freedom that you're giving us. They're saying, hey, look, who are you trying to please? Are you trying to please your friends? Are you trying to please your family? Who is it that's at the forefront of what you're trying to do? And this is about you, and this is your life. And this is where we get to be.
It's not. Linda, it's not. It's not about you. We're believers.
Oh, well, that was a given.
No, but it's not a given. A lot of people think that choice is their own. We serve the living God of the universe. He is our Lord. He's our King, and we're to do what He's asking us to do, and He's not asking us to check out. It's not up to us. We need to say, Lord, what do you want me to do with these years? Because from 65 to 80, you will probably have all healthy years. From 80 to 90, that health will start to decline a little. Home activity. But ask the Lord what He wants you to do. It's not up to you.
Yeah. Well, that was a given in my
Yes.
thought process because that's how I ended up in this podcast in my
Mm.
lane. But the emptiness and the disconnectedness and the loss of purpose is really significant and it can really affect our mental health. And then if our mental health is affected, then our physical health is really affected as well.
Yeah.
So mentoring the next generation, you mentioned that moving into a neighborhood of, that is has young people and old people. And I just love what you're talking about in regards to retirement and mission field and finding new purpose, and how that's really going to be personal as you begin to think about your retirement, spend some time in prayer, really understanding that you do have the opportunity to finish well, to live well, and to serve well. Okay.
Yeah.
So hopefully that resonates with the people that are listening with today, because in my podcast, I do mention that those are very, very significant issues that can result from a retirement that is just as you described, with not a lot of purpose. So,
You know, Linda, when you said the word freedom, that really resonated with me. And I think that people look at freedom even maybe with the wrong perspective of, yes, you have every opportunity out there. Now, what decision do you want to make with that opportunity? This time to do something different, to maybe spend more time in your hobbies, but do it with intentionality.
right.
So I feel like the listeners need to hear that. And, we often say, you know, a lot of people look at that freedom and go, I have the freedom to go move somewhere warm and to do those things. But they don't look at the other side of it where it's like, okay, but you're moving away from your family at a time when they need you and could use your wisdom and your encouragement and all those things that you've gathered over the years and pour that into them. So I love to encourage people to think about that differently.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So we are giving everybody a really different take on retirement and how that's use, and we have been gifted things. We have our natural talents, we have our spiritual talents, and so how can we use that in our lives? Because when we do that, we're going to find that purpose, and that's really what we've been created for anyway, right? Is to fulfill
Right.
that God-given purpose. There's so much good in your book, so I really do want people to be able to find it. Where can they get your book?
So the easiest
Books,
place,
I would say
yes,
books, because it's
yeah.
I work for him, she works for him, and I retire for him. So where can they get those books?
Excellent. The easiest place to do that is to go to iworkforhim.com, and it's iwork4him.com. We have a bookstore set up there. And what's really neat is that we have had the opportunity you can buy the paper book, you can buy an audio book, and in the audiobook, everybody that wrote a chapter is reading the chapter themselves. So you're getting all these different personalities that you can listen to. We also have an option there where you can buy it and download the PDF. And so if you want it instantly, that's just a really easy way to do that. So iworkforhim.com, just look for the bookstore while they're there. There's all kinds of resources available for listeners, depending on what you're really wanting to focus in on. Just check it out and connect with us because we would love that. And get the book.
And on our I Retire for Him page within I Work for Him, you'll find a lot of other links to resources that we have found, because we're a ministry we do get to speak to retired crowds sometimes, which is so much fun. But there's other links to other ministries that are doing this kind of stuff as well as our I Retire for Him podcast, which interviews tons of people that are doing this kind of work. People just like you, Linda, who realized, hey, I'm not done. I got stuff to do. I'm retired age, but God is not done with me yet. And here's what we tell people. If you're not dead, you're not done. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose.
Yes, I feel like those words you just said, Jim, were exactly what I've said. I'm not done. I've got things to do. This is a desire that has been given to me. And so I totally resonate with that. And I have some professional colleagues that are thinking about retiring. So I bought them the book, because why not get it at the front end? So my podcast is always for care partners who are taking care of people. My podcast is for those that are in a crisis, either, navigating healthcare or any other issues regarding aging in place. And so having these resources available are really meaningful. And I've been to your website. In fact, you can find aging in place strategies and answers on your website. And so, yes, you will find plenty of resources there. But I'm going to tell you, listeners, that when you get this book, I do want you to go to chapter 3, because there's nothing like commitment. There's nothing like reviewing the covenants and making that commitment, because when we make a commitment, then we can check our progress. And I've been talking about that too, as we started 2024, that let's get in a different plan. Let's see if there's been some habits that have crept in that we don't want to be there anymore. These are the times to make the changes as we think about those New Year's resolutions. At the end of every podcast, because I've been a caregiver, you guys have been a caregiver, and it's some of the hardest times that you will go through in your life, personally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. It is just not an easy time. So I love to offer a caregiver tip. Would you like to offer a caregiver tip or two to my audiences today?
Sure.
Well, ladies first.
So we're newly navigating, having Jim's parents live next door to us, and they're 89 and 90. And one of the things that recently I've been doing is, I'm going to go over and fill their pill boxes, or I'm going to go over and take the grocery delivery, or whatever it might be. But realizing that my agenda may not be the same agenda, when I get there. So yes, I have to get those things done, but other things are going to be needed that we didn't know about, or, and so taking a breath and saying a prayer and saying, Lord, just help me to be flexible, helping me to just receive whatever is happening in the moment and just go with it, because that's whatever is important to them right then. And so I'm very aware that I like to, accomplish my agenda. And so, but it's their needs that matter. And so that's really just been something I've been trying to shift, as I pull in and get ready to go in, and just say, okay, whatever, I'll get this done because it's necessary, but whatever else.
I think the biggest thing for me, because we're busy people. Our kids have been out of the house for a long time. We had kids young. So since our mid-40s, we've been empty nesters. And now we're back being like we have nesters again. Only these ones don't live in our house, but they have needs. Is to realize that this is not forever, and that just the time that we spend with my mom and dad is valuable time, and that we're never going to get an opportunity to do it again. And so not to always be in such a hurry. And for me, my dad was an athlete, and he really was an athlete into his 70s. And so he's fallen like 5 or 6 times since we moved him here to Missouri, and he bounces. He literally bounces off the ground,
which we're grateful for.
and so, but he's antsy. He wants to go do stuff. And my mom, she walks around with a walker. She can't do much. And so I just had to say, like last Saturday, my dad just really wanted to go on a field trip. I said, Dad, it was freezing cold, 3 degrees. And I said, let's just go. But it was beautiful. It was beautiful and sunny. I said, Dad, let's just go somewhere and have some fun. And so we just went on a field trip. I had stuff I needed to do, but I know deep in my heart that stuff will still be there next week. And I don't know if my dad will be here next week. And so just to take that time, and yes, there are days where it's agonizing and other days where it's great. So just don't miss the years by being frustrated.
Yes, absolutely. I talk about that a lot, because this is our season to do this. And while you're going through it, it can seem like an eternity, but you only get this season. And so like we want to finish well, we want to serve well, we want to be a good caregiver. So thank you for sharing that information. And I so thank you for being my guest today. I love how you're going to inspire people that we don't even know, really, because in a podcast, you don't get to see them, but we know they're listening, and we know that they're going to latch on to these new thoughts and these new ideas. And they're hopefully, as we continue to think and pray, that, on our own lives, but as their lives as well, that they're able to affect, like you said, Jim, we don't have to affect everybody in the world, but we can certainly look around our space and offer the practical tips that you offer in this beautiful book. So thank you all for what you do every single day and what you're doing in the lives of your family.
No, it's such an honor. And thank you, Linda, for having us on your show today. If anybody in your audience wants to get in touch with us, again, just go to the website. We'd love to be able to help inspire millions of retirees just like you across the country to live out their faith right where God's got them.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Jim and Martha Brangenberg. I retire for him. I work for him, and she works for him. Thank you. Thank you for joining me today. Please remember that this podcast is intended as guidance and not advice. Share this podcast with friends and family who are currently in crisis mode or with people who would like to start developing their own roadmap for aging in place. Listeners, if you would like a deeper dive into a topic discussed during a podcast, please subscribe to Aging in Place Strategies and Answers, where you will be able to access premium content. Or if you would like to suggest a topic for this podcast, please contact me at linda.agingstrategies@gmail.com. As always, I value the time you spend with me.